would be good for me to have.
Hey guys. We're just gonna wait about like 60 seconds to fully start, but I just want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. And you know, we had a pretty fun race there last weekend. It was, or the weekend before. You know, it was tricky, you know, obviously light conditions. So I'm going to go over some pretty basic stuff that I kind of saw while going around the race course. You know, I also reached out to some other sailors to chat about what, you know, what they saw. So I'll kind of go over it, the race itself, and then I'll kind of go into some tips and tricks for kind of light air sailing. And then I will open it up to questions. So that's kind of the format. There is a chat box, and so if anyone has questions during the webinar, just put them in the chat. I've got it open, so if it's a quick one, I can address it right away. If it's a bit of a lengthy one, I'll probably leave it to the end. Also, at the end during questions, if you do have one that you would like to talk about, and I can open up the mic, but I am going to keep the mic muted for the session just to keep it rolling. Also, as I said, this is pretty basic, and I just, you know, I don't want to keep you guys here all night. It's a pretty hot night in Vancouver. I'm sure people have other plans than be sitting on their computer. So if you do have like a question that's maybe a little bit more technical, if you do have a question that maybe pops in your head later tonight, or if, you know, you don't want to maybe ask a question and you might be a little bit nervous, that's totally fine. I've been there. You can email me, you can call me, you could message me on Facebook, you could text message me. My phone number's in the email. So reach out to me anyway. I'm always happy to talk about sailing. It's my favorite sport. So, and everything I'm saying on here, you know, if you don't think that I said something correctly, or you think something else happened, you know, feel free to put that in the chat and we can kind of chat about you know, what you experienced on the race and during the race. So we're going to get into the debrief right now. So my name's Drew Mitchell. I think most people, I can see the names on the list here. I think I've either sailed or met or chatted with almost everyone. If you don't know me, I run the North Sails Loft here in Vancouver. And I was out racing in the race. I was on a boat called Warriors Zulu. It was a fun race for everyone. You know, I think everyone wished we had a little bit more wind, but I think that's a classic round Bowen race. So I just want to go over a quick overview. You can see on the right this nice picture that Troy and Joey put together for us. Make sure that we knew how to get around an island. So I'm going to start off with the start and just chat about the start a little bit. You know, then we're going to go and chat about the south side of the island. We're going to work on to Roger Curtis Corner. Everyone knows that's always a tricky one. You know, they always say don't go near Roger Curtis Corner. We're going to talk about the backside. That was definitely the most difficult. And I think the most boats retired on the backside due to, you know, just timing and wind issues. Then Hut Island, I think most of the boats that raced had to either decide to go on one side of Hut Island or the other, and just chat about the decision-making process on that one. And the last one, we're just going to talk about the last corner in the finish, just as you come around and head back down towards Snug Cove. And then, as I said, finally, we're going to just talk about tips for tricky light conditions, and just to see if, you know, you guys were doing these, or just a couple heads up on things you might want to think about next time you're out in a race. We tend to race around islands, and chances are wind does not go completely around an island the majority of the time. So chances are you're going to end up in a light spot again sometime in your Pacific Northwest racing time. So these are some tips and tricks that might help you get through those light spots a little bit quicker next time. So I just wanted to chat about the start. Look at that really cool picture. I think I found this on Pacific Northwest Sailing. It was an Instagram account. Really cool shot of the start line. Pretty impressive that we had like, you know, 60 plus boats out there. So on the start, and I think a lot of people kind of got caught kind of sailing around, and maybe not, it was a very long start line. So you really wanted to get there, and it's tough in the morning. You want to get there early And the reason was it's very light air. So we were trying to sail there personally. And eventually we had to turn on our engine because we realized we needed to get to the start line and get on the north end of the start line before the start whistle or even before the ferry came out. So in very light air, you want to make sure you get yourself to the start line and start figuring out where the start line is, where your pin is, where your boat is. And in very light air, you want to get there earlier because chances are you won't be able to sail as quickly or maneuver as quickly around. It was a downwind start this year. So it's pretty important, like everyone, the most awesome, situation would be to put your kite up and be ripping at the start at like 8.5 knots and just sail past everyone. That's not really feasible with a boat, with a start line with 67 boats plus. Chances of you having to maneuver are very large, and having a spinnaker up is pretty dangerous. So the majority of boats, and what I would recommend is start with your jib up with your kite ready to go. So you want to be on the start line. You want to be on the start line, and you want to be ripping around the start line or slowly sailing, depending on the conditions, with your jib up. Fairly close to the start. You don't want to get too far away just in case there's current and you can't get back to the start line. Luckily we had a bit of an outflow so that we were able to get going across the start line and we weren't being pushed back. You want your jib up, and then as soon as the gun goes and you feel like you have a safe lane, so as soon as the gun goes, if there's a boat right ahead of you and you're on port and they're on starboard, it's probably not the best idea to put your kite up. But the optimal situation would be put have the jib up. As soon as the gun goes, bear off, put the kite up, jib down, and then start sailing, and then start figuring it out. A big question would be where you wanted to start on every start line, especially large start lines like this with many boats. You want to choose the side of your start line early, and the reason for that is if at 10 minutes you decide you want to be on the shore and you're at the boat, you probably can't make it to the shore. So we on our boat had a device that you could pin the boat and the pin, or the shore and the boat, and it would let us know how close we were to line. We actually got to the start too late to even decide that we were going to go over to the pin. So we kind of made it about halfway down and then kind of pinned it where we thought it was, and then came back to the boat. Our original plan was to start at the boat as we found that there was a little more pressure there. After the start, I think the boats that really did well off the starts, you could see that X Yacht had a pretty good start, and they were kind of pin end or like near the shore third. I found Jason Saunderson also had a very good start along the shore. Like, you had a really nice angle, and it seemed like there was a little bit of wind compression against the shore. Saying that, I started over the boat. Well, I think longboard was midline, and with a midline start with most of these, with a lot of boats, it's kind of a good option to start in the midline, and then you can see if someone breaks away and you can quickly make a maneuver. If you're at the boat and everyone at the pin takes off, or near shore and takes off, you have a long way to sail to get over towards the shore to get into that, positive current, better breeze, whatever it is. The other thing is staying in pressure. So with a lot of boats around the start line, what happens, especially in lighter air, is the wind will actually pick up and jump over the fleet. What I find, and as me being a tactician, I'm usually calling for boats, and I'll actually have one of the crew members, usually someone that doesn't have a very important job like trimming the kite, or maybe someone on the bow that may be doing a sail change. I have someone looking for pressure and calling pressure, and I take that information from someone calling pressure and input it into my tactics. So I'll think about where the pressure is and where the other boats are, and see who's making gains and who's losing, and then I decide to where to go. But a lot of the time in this light stuff, unless there's major current, pressure wins. Current's a whole different game, and you can kind of see that. But at the same time, you can only see pressure on the water. Sometimes you can see current, but it's usually pretty evident when, say, if you're in more pressure and another boat is in a better current and they're moving quicker than you, you probably want to start moving over that way. Calling starboard or ducking. So this is a big thing, and I think no one's really raced with this many boats in whatever, 20 months, 24 months. I would say maybe around Salt Spring might have been the last race with 60 plus boats. And you really want to make a game plan and stick to it. So a classic move is to have, you know, say a boat, maybe even slower than you ahead of you, and you're on starboard. And you are going to call starboard on this boat. But what's going to happen is they're going to jibe, and you're going to end up having to go around them, or you're going to get stuck in their lee if they jibe early. So you won't be able to sail through them. So a lot of the times, if you're planning, say if you started over the boat and you were trying to make your way back over to the shore, and you were on port, another boat was on starboard, I would probably duck that boat to try to get to the location that I had in my game plan. Okay. To like, I would say look at the macro level instead of the micro level, especially at a start in lots of boats. You want to make sure a half a boat length or whatever is much better to go to the side that you decided was going to be advantageous than making a boat jibe and now having a one-on-one duel, if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of like a summary of the start. I think getting over to the shore definitely paid off. It seemed like the little bit of breeze that was over near the boat completely evaporated after the start. And a lot of boats that ended up out there ended up completely stopping. A lot of people along the shore kept slipping along. So getting on the east side of Bowen, I think getting towards the shore, starting towards the shore and getting towards the shore, if you didn't start at the shore, was advantageous for the first, 50% of the race. So the south side, so same type of deal. It looked like there was more pressure out in the strait, and us and a boat called Longboard, the Riptide 35, we were almost trading jibes, and it really looked like there was more pressure out in the strait, and we were kind of talking about that, but we were almost one-on-one sailing, so we were almost just jibing on each other, and they took a little bit of a jibe out, and we kind of stayed inside. And then when we came back together, we had made major gains on the inside of the island, or against the island. And the reason for that, I think, one, I was looking and there was current, better current along the shore. And I think there was a little bit of shore compression or wind compression on the land. So the wind actually picked up just as you got really close to land. It was almost like shoots down the shore. While we were doing this, you want to be sailing the boat. If you do notice this and you do find that there's like a 50, 100 meter band that's ripping down, any shore in the Pacific Northwest, we're pretty lucky. We got pretty steep cliffs that we like to sail against. You can get pretty close to those cliffs, and it's definitely good to get as close as you can without making contact, obviously, on shore or rock. So we were staying as close as we could, and the big person that you want to focus on and listen to is the navigator, because they're going to be able to tell you how deep it is and when you should be tacking. So as a tactician, I was basically asking to go as close to the shore as possible. We had our navigator calling the jibe when he was not comfortable enough to go any further. Okay. Another big thing, we were kind of jibing down along the shore. I'm not sure if anybody else was doing this, but we did a bunch of jibes, and we didn't have a couple clean ones, and a clean jibe, and if you're doing 10 clean jibes down a shore, is going to be much quicker than if you do, say, 10 not good jibes, or 1 or 2 good jibes and 8 bad ones just trying to stay in. So I think, not only worrying about staying in good current or good pressure, but also focusing on your boat maneuvers to get yourself down that shore is also very important, especially when the boats are tight. So when you're in a big group of boats, a good jibe could get you out in front of a boat, and a bad jibe could have you ducking or being sent back onto your other jibe if you are on starboard. So James just commented, he pulled back, dug deep, and popped the blooper. So he had no jibing needed. I've got actually a picture of this later in the slideshow, but symmetrical boats are pretty lucky in that type of stuff. You can pull back and sail much deeper angles. Asymmetrical boats, you're going to end up needing to jibe more often since you have the pull up forward. But no matter what boat you have, if you're not as lucky as James and you don't rock a blooper, you're probably going to be tossing up a couple jibes, especially if you're against the shore. Making sure your jibes are slick and clean is very important. So moving on to Cape Roger Curtis, I moved here about 10 years ago, and I always heard, do not ever go near this point. As you can see here, us and longboard are squeezed right up against it. So, you know, do you want to cut it close or go for a wide rounding? In the conditions that we had when we were rolling up there, I think getting close, you wanted to round it close and then you wanted to get into the middle. There was like that outflow that was coming down, so almost like a northerly. So we were sailing downwind, and then all of a sudden we had a couple puffs come down off the hill, and then all of a sudden we were sailing upwind. And as soon as we were sailing upwind, so this is us sailing along, we all got knocked, and longboard was outside of us. They started reaching out and kept their kite up a little longer. We switched to a jib and went up the shore. As soon as we both got knocked, we tacked, they were gone. So one thing that I would recommend is you know, not getting too close and jib reaching in that location if you don't think that the breeze is going to continue from like the east or the southeast. When it switched to the north, if you would have stayed further out, you had ability to take that knock and tack over. Now you're on the lifted tack, so you had to invent you're winning or leading on any boat that was inside of you as soon as you tacked over. If you stay close to the island, we were getting big gusts coming down the island as well. So like, you know, it's such a tricky concept sailing. It's like you go around the island, you might as well get as close as you can the whole way around, sail the shortest distance. Unfortunately, you know, we're not in power boats, so that's not the case. So we were trying to we put our kite down and we're going along with our jib. We didn't recognize that there was this northerly coming in. It was very difficult to see. You know, we sail in pretty low profile boats, so it's hard to see. If you had someone up the mast, it probably would have been pretty evident. But we were actually getting knocked over from these like easterlies that were coming down off of Bowen. And, you know, we had someone on the boom vang and we had everyone hiking, and we were just kind of slipping around and kind of not having very good maneuvers. And the reason was these puffs were coming, just shooting down off the land. So I found that if we would have stayed further out, not only would we have had a better angle when that shift came in, when that northerly, but we also would have been able to have someone calling the puffs because they would have hit the water first and then come down. So we could have prepared our main sheet guy, could have let his main out. We could have had the boom bang eased already. And we maybe could have even bore off so we weren't getting knocked over as quickly. Last comment, keep the kite up or jib reach. It's a really tough call. It's depending on crew work, but you know, holding your kite in that light stuff as long as possible. But it's soon as you start losing VMG and you're not trying to, say if you're not really trying to head way over to the other side, to like the Sunshine Coast side, soon as you start losing VMG and you see you're entering a transition zone, getting a jib up is probably a good idea. But as soon as that kite gets down, you want to make sure that whoever's, you know, your pit person or your bow person, they get that kite down and they have it ready to be hoisted again immediately. You never know in these transition zones in the Pacific Northwest. Sometimes you run into something and then 5 minutes later, 3 minutes later, you know, the wind's back behind you again, you need to put that kite up. So, you know, I would keep the kite up as long as possible until you start hitting the transition zone. Get the kite down, make sure it's prepared to go up again, but, you know, use your jib to keep the boat moving. So the first half of the backside. So I just wanted to kind of talk about this. So I think so the front boats I've explained, switched to like a northerly outflow right after Roger Curtis, probably about a minute after that previous picture. Second set of boats were kind of reaching a little bit and sailing shortly after Roger Curtis. And then the third group of boats, and we were getting really worried up front. We're like, oh man, they all have their kites up back there. You know, they're gonna be rocking down on us. And we're sailing upwind and like no wind, almost going nowhere. And we see a bunch of colorful kites coming down on us. It's not a great feeling. So I think the third group of boats had that southeast and continued. Eventually it did switch, I think somewhere down the first half or into the second half of that backside of Bowen. Transitions were very important. So like something that like I'll chat about, Peter sent me a little email, Peter Salisbury with Lombard, he ended up winning the race. He kind of commented about like we had really like transitions are important, and transitions it's very light air, so it goes from light air to basically no air to light air again, and you want to keep your sails working, and in this light air, especially in transition zones, you're going to see a lot of wind shear on your sails. And what wind shear means is at the bottom of your boat, you're gonna have a different wind angle at the top of your boat. So the biggest thing I find is to make sure that your sails are like breathing. I always say breathing, make sure they're out. So make sure you're powered up. You don't want them too far out. You don't want to pretend like you're sailing downwind, but you definitely want to like be on the side of a little bit more twist in your sails and a little bit more ease until you get the boat moving and then start pulling it in. You never want to rock into a transition zone or come into a dead spot and have all your sails really tight and your leashes like banged on. You want to have the, your main traveler up, your main sheet off, nice twist in your mainsail. You probably want to have your jib off. A lot of the jibs are pretty high aspect, so they'll twist off pretty quickly. Genoa eased a little bit, maybe someone down on the leeward side, kind of holding the clue out if it is falling into the sail. Those type of things, because I find getting yourself through transition zones in the Pacific Northwest, as frustrating as it is and as challenging as it is, it really kind of makes and breaks a lot of races. And if you can just keep the focus and try to keep moving, and keep those sails trim, you'll have a better chance of getting through them. Saying that, sometimes you can do all that. You can stay focused. You can have the best trim, super light boat, and you will not make it through the transition zone. That's just part of racing the Pacific Northwest. But at the same time, keep trying and keep using those tips to try to get through the transition zone, and also set your boat up for, the next breeze that you believe is coming. Backside tips and tricks. So this is one of my favorite pictures that I found online. I think the backside for, say, we had 25 boats finished. So I would say, close to 50 boats. I'd probably have my barbecue going in that type of conditions if I had one on the boat. On the backside, it definitely was pretty tricky for everybody. Kind of a joke, we had tons of different, sailors out there. So, if you were out there for fun, the backside would be a great spot for barbecue because there was no wind. Cook your hamburgers up pretty quickly, get them down and keep racing. Be prepared for sail changes. So we just touched. So Tammy just asked a quick question. When the wind dies, point of direction, would you like to float? I would say you would want to float towards where you think the next wind is going to be or what angle the wind is going to be. So, also, I find in the Pacific Northwest, the floating is mainly determined on the current. So sometimes it's not really up to you, but if you want to make a game plan and if there's no wind and you're just floating, you want to work as hard as you can to try to get your boat moving to where you think the next wind is going to be or come from. And that's always a bit of a toss-up, but making a game plan and sticking to it is important. As soon as that wind feels, if you made the right choice, you'll know pretty quickly. If you haven't, you tack, you jibe, you start fighting the boat back to where, where you see the wind and where it is. And keeping your head out of the boat is very important. Oh, that's perfect. Awesome, Tammy. She just said that was our math and they managed to finish, which is great. So be prepared for sail changes. So, put the barbecue away. Make sure that all sails are ready to go up and down. Okay. So one big thing, and I normally used to race on a boat with a handicap of 69. So we were right kind of in the middle of the fleet most of the time. So I always used competition ahead and behind me to kind of determine what was happening around me. We have 67 boats out there. You're going to have boats ahead of you. You're going to have boats behind you most of the time. And using those boats to see current, to see wind, to see angle, to see direction, to see what sails they're using, to see when the wind is changing, all those type of things, those are identifications to help you make a proper decision on what's going to happen next and prepare the team and the boat to set up for success for the next wind shift, for the next pressure, for the next hole, trying to sail around the hole, whatever it is. As again, I've talked about this before, keep an eye out for pressure. So eyes out the boat. In some of the larger boats in this type of racing, I would recommend putting someone up the mast. There are some big races in the Pacific Northwest, especially around Van Isle, where you end up floating and you're kind of in that last leg in the Gulf Islands. A lot of the time we would put someone up the mast to see where, the wind is and where it might be bending around a corner just to help, because you're just floating there. Saying that, I don't know if the round Bowen's really the race to be tossing people up the mast, but if you have a young, light, gung-ho sailor that wants to go up there and maybe give you a little reading, it's definitely a lot easier to see wind from the top of a mast than from on the water level. Sailing along the shore for geographical lifts. So on both sides, there are geographical lifts. Wherever you end up against the shore, a lot of the time the wind will bend. You have to get very close to the shore for the wind to alter or kind of change course on the shore. But if you know, a lot of the time these cliffs and these edges of these islands are fairly steep, so you can get in there. And if you can, and like, you know, Longboard did a really good job of it, and we were getting pretty worried. They were over on the Bowen side, we were kind of over on the Keats side. And we ended up using Keats just the same as they did over on the Bowen side. And we were basically short tacking the shores using these geographical lifts to try to keep ourselves going. And as soon as we come back in the middle, we'd be pointing at each other again. So we'd head back. So, you know, a lot of the time getting against those shores, especially in the light, tricky stuff, kind of helps you a little bit in terms of point because the wind kind of bends on the land. The other thing on the back is like keep boat moving. We chatted about that. You know, weight is important. If the sails are starting to fall in the boat, getting everyone to the low side, I'm sure everyone knows that. And as we talked about sail trim, making sure your sails are twisted up, eased out is very important. You know, keeping that boat moving at any cost is you know, a tough job, but it's gonna help you get to the finish line. So Hut Island, which side? So I think this one's a pretty standard basic like answer. So during this race, the first four boats were able to sail around the outside of the island in pressure. After the first four boats went around the outside, the wind died. And so the only option was to go on the inside. So it's pretty evident that, like, especially if you're following a full fleet, sometimes you'll have an outlier. That's like, you know, I'm going to get this crazy lift, or I'm going to get this current and rip around. You know, I'd keep my eyes on him as I'm approaching Hut Island. But I think we couldn't go on the inside because there was no wind on the inside. So I think in this race, the Hut Island decision was just basically made on pressure. So keeping your eyes out of the boat, looking to see what other boats are doing. But I don't think there was a big split around Hut Island. At least that's what I was told by the sailors I talked to. And we were able to get around one side. Everyone else was get around the other. But like keeping your eyes out for pressure and seeing what other boats are doing is probably the easiest way when you get to this spot of the race. If it was, you know, wind on both sides, I would probably be looking for pressure as well, but I'd also be looking for current and using other boats' identification about which one's a little quicker. Technically, the inside's a little bit shorter, but if there's better pressure and a little bit more current on the outside, then you probably want to choose that. But, you know, that will probably be in next year's race. So, you know, coming into the last corner in the finish, this is James's amazing picture here. He's got his new North Sails spinnaker up with his 1980 blooper. Pretty cool to see that out on the course again. You know, just chatting about the last corner and finish, it's always really hard to get around that last corner of Bowen Island and start heading down towards Snug Cove. One thing you want to do is, you know, I think in Longboard and us, we were both reaching and we could have had our kites up. It was such light air that we could have had our kites up and probably been going about a knot faster. But we were just kind of worried about putting the kite up and it collapsing. But about, I would say right before the corner, they were say 2.5 minutes ahead of us at the corner. They put their kite up. As soon as they put their kite up, I called for kite up, and we were able to sail that distance that they sailed with their jib with our spinnaker up at the same angle. So I think getting that kite up as soon as possible, and probably earlier than you would think, was pretty important to get yourself around that corner. With that northerly kind of outflow, you could put that kite up way earlier than you think. It's a little scary because you're no wind and you have a lee shore, which, you know, no one wants to end up on. But at the same time, for performance reasons, I would have that kite up a little bit earlier, and it probably would have gave you a little bit more advantage because, you know, jib reaching in light air is very challenging, especially if you're in a sport boat with like a non-overlapping jib. It's pretty slow. So as soon as you rounded, you wanted to look behind for pressure. So at the same time, it looked when we rounded, it looked completely dead in the middle. So we basically were jibing into the shore, and it seemed like there was a little pressure down the island again. So it was very easy for us. I kept watching or trying to watch the races as we were heading back into English Bay, and it seemed like some other people went a little bit further out and maybe one jived it. But I think on that last little bit, just keeping an eye out and looking up how sound and finding where that pressure is and lining the boat up for any nice puffs coming down. Because like if you have a knot of 3 knots and then you go up to 6 knots, a lot of boats will start moving a little quicker, or at least quicker than you were in 3 knots, or maybe you actually start moving in 6 knots and 3 knots you weren't moving. So keeping an eye out for a little bit of pressure, I think, is very important. Depending on the boat, I would there are some little sport boats that can just snap off jives and snap off tacks, and it doesn't even matter. But some boats in that light air, if you're jiving or tacking or whatever in a short distance, you're definitely going to be hurting your performance, because the boats take a long time to speed back up in that light air. You have your apparent wind slows down, everything moves back. You're now sailing either lower if you're tacked or higher if you jibed than you were originally. You have to get your boat speed moving again, then your apparent wind starts working its way, and then you start sailing that angle again. So, unless it's necessary in that last stretch, I'd probably minimize my maneuvers unless you were driving for pressure, you're driving to maybe stay on top of a boat or protect a position, or you're driving to maybe get into some positive current. The last one, and this is always the trickiest, in buoy racing, I always recommend on your last leg to look at the finish line and see which end is favored. It should be the closest one to your leeward mark if you're not using the pin as your leeward mark. This type of racing, this finish line wasn't there when we started. So as soon as you have visual on the finish line, I would start like a poll on the boat, and who thinks what end is favored. At the end, the tactician should make the call on what end they want to go to. But on a big finish line, finishing at the favored end and finishing at the unfavored end, you're probably saving yourself 2 to 3 minutes. Okay. The favored end at this finish line, which is always a smart idea by the race committee well, not always, but it is a fairly good idea, because if you have everyone finishing close to you, it's very easy to take down their scores. Saying that, if there's 25 boats rolling down, and say if it was a proper outflow, it would probably be a little bit scary for Jason to be sitting on his boat with everyone coming in trying to get beside the boat with their kites up. So I think the boat was favored at this finish line, but in any race, you should be heads out of the boat as soon as you see the finish line to figure out where you want to be. And these big distance races, they can, you can win or lose by 10 seconds, 5 seconds. A minute and a half could take you from 10th to 5th. So make sure you focus on which end of the race finish line is favored, just like the start, and it will save you some time. So tips for tricky light conditions. Okay, the biggest thing is just head out of the boat. I think you're looking for pressure, you're looking for current, you're looking for if there's any wind changes, if there's any kind of restarts, and you're also looking at competitors. Using competitors as kind of pawns to see what's happening around the race course is the easiest way to tell what's going on. It's very difficult to read a location just from sitting in your boat, but other boats, if they're kind of like telltales, they kind of let you know what's happening either ahead of you or behind you, depending on which way the breeze is coming. Make sail changes as smooth as possible. That's easy to say. Everyone knows that. But at the same time, getting your crew work down, and throughout the day, nice thing is at the end of the day, these, your jibes, your tacks are getting better and better. That would be, that'd be a successful day for our team. If at the end of the day, whatever our maneuvers were, they were better than the start. But you want to keep them as smooth as possible. One way that I do that is I always talk through my jibes and tacks. So I'll let everyone know we're preparing to jibe, and then I have a countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In these tricky conditions, sometimes I'll actually do the countdown, and I'll actually count 5, 4, 3, 4, 5, and then count back down. So everyone will be on hold if they hear me starting to count back up. I definitely get some funny looks from some of my crewmates, but at the same time, sometimes I feel like I'm going to attack, and something something switches or I see something that I don't want to tack or drive at that moment. So I start counting back up until you hear that one as the driver, as the trimmer, as one of the crew moving body weight. You don't move. You stay in your position. You want to have a game plan. So everyone, I saw a video posted by Troy online, and he actually had like a briefing before the race on a pretty nice, looked like a pretty nice power boat. I wasn't invited on, but we'll bring that up later. And you want to have a game plan. So you want to have a game plan for the whole island. You want to look at the course, you want to check the breeze, you want to have a game plan, but no one knows what's going to happen. And no, you can't predict exactly what's going to happen. If sailing would be so easy if you just knew exactly where to go all the time, and it was like a racetrack. It's like go left, go as tight left as you can, right? But so you want to be able to adjust your plan as the wind changes. Okay, so if you see something, don't say this is what we talked about on the dock at 9 a.m. and every boat just starts passing you. You need to adapt to those changes and start to adjust your plan for the new changing conditions. I've gone over this a lot, and I was a big radial sailor growing up. I used to just sit there and watch the lasers go upwind first, and it was very evident the first cross where you need to be on the first third of the start line. It was the easiest thing. Then I got into laser racing, and I'd get out front on the first cross. I had no idea where I was going, but that's another story. So you want to use your other boats to figure out what's going on in the course. And it's very easy if you keep your eye and kind of figure out what's going on. Body weight, sail trim, very important to keep the boat moving, in light air, having weight on the leeward side, maybe doing presses or roll tacks if your boat allows it, and making sure your sails aren't too tight and making sure you're on the ease side of it and having twists in them to keep that boat moving is very important to get yourself around an island with, with less than 8 knots all day or 10 knots. Make sure you check the current strength and direction. As I said, I moved out here 10 years ago. I had no idea how important current was. And current, not only the strength and direction, sometimes you don't even think about the breeze. You're literally just going for current because it's that effective. So making sure, the current, the strength, the direction that the current's going in, and that gets put into your game plan. One last one, never give up while racing, until, you've decided your team's too tired and you want to quit. You've decided that you've made it around, you have had enough fun, you want to stop, or you've done the math and you're 10 nautical miles from the finish and you're 1 hour to finish, your boat doesn't do 10 knots, you're not going to make it. Okay, so never give up while racing is a big thing. I think, a lot of people, especially on that backside in that, in the group that did finish, I'm sure there was a lot of hard work in that and making sure that you just didn't give up, continue having fun. But just try not to give up because it can be super frustrating and super dull. And it's very easy just to, start staring at the clouds and kind of forget that you're in a yacht race. But every second counts out there. So my recommendation is to never give up. And then, I was pretty lucky. I had Peter Salisbury, who's been racing the Pacific Northwest, his entire life, has a lot more knowledge of the conditions. He's probably done more around Bowens than birthdays that I've had. So he sent me an email, very good sailor, has a really nice boat. He sent me an email and I just wanted to kind of read it to everyone because he had some good points, some stuff that we kind of touched base on in this webinar. I'm just going to be looking to my right side of the screen because I have the email up. So the first point he had was important to position yourself as you approach multiple wind transition zones on the west and north side of Bowen. So important to anticipate what direction where the next band of wind will transition and make sure you're in the right place as best as you can guess anyways. We're all guessing out there, or educated guesses. Guestaticians are telling you where to go. But I think as I explained before, when we went around Roger Curtis and we were trying to just sail as tight as we could to the island, we did notice that there was a northerly outflow coming. So they kept their kite up a little bit longer. We went to jib. They got out into the middle of, just in the middle there. And soon as the wind came from the north, we both bore off, obviously. They put their kite down and we tacked onto a port tack and they were just, 50 boat lengths ahead of us. So they had technically positioned their boat in a better location during that transition zone. We were on the inside of the knock, which is not one you want to be on. You want to be on the outside of a knock. You want to be on the inside of a lift, relative to the boats around you. Awareness by the helms. The second point here was awareness by the helmsman and trimmers of the substantial wind shear on the west and north sides of Bowen, and talking up how sails should be trimmed. So constant communication of how sails should be trimmed. It's a long race. It's a long day, especially as it gets hot like this. It's very easy for a trimmer to be tired. So if someone else needs to just chime in and kind of help them out, maybe switch positions. At times there was differences between the bottom set of telltales and the masthead was off by 35 degrees. So he's saying he likes to press on the telltales in these conditions to keep the boat rolling as fast as possible and don't worry about height or how the boat's pointing. I completely agree with that. Something Dennis LaFoe taught me when I was lucky enough to get out sailing with him once was he uses the middle telltales as kind of the power telltales. So he's not really worried about the ones low on the bottom of the sail, the ones up top. But if he's just trying to trim for power and speed, you want to trim off the middle sets of telltales on your head sail as well as your mainsail. He also asked how others manage this. He was just kind of asking, that's how he managed it. He chatted about trim and he pressed on his sails, which I think in those light conditions is probably the only thing you can do. Once we come up with questions, if some other people had some comments on how others manage this, we'd love to hear it. And this is recorded, so Peter will be able to listen to this and hear your comments. The last point that he had was importance of leading to the beach on the east and south sides of Bowen in the outflow and easterly wind directions. So as I spoke about that earlier at the start, you want to get to the beach on the south side there where James just put the blooper up and got his sail straight. I think a lot of other boats were up against the shore. It was very important. The reason why he had a comment here saying there were major wind compression along both sides of the shores, which really advantaged boats going there first. I also noticed there was better current as well. So not only was there better pressure, there was better current. And the funny thing was, as I spoke about earlier, the pressure looked better in the strait. It almost looked like you should do, and I've seen this before. I remember everyone came around, started going down the south side, and everyone got stuck in a hole and they tried to sail straight down. And I remember this, Mike Clements, literally in a 242, sailed all the way around into the strait and around the whole fleet. It was one of the most frustrating things I've ever seen. I was sitting in a Martin 242 in that hole. Sometimes it does look great out there, but I think, you should, this time at least, you should have been in on that shore using that wind compression and a little bit of the current. So those were Peter Salisbury's 3 comments. Very good sailor, very good guy. I appreciate him sending this email. I just have one last slide here tonight. And, we have questions. If anyone wants to ask questions, I actually have one more slide after this. So we'll just quickly do a question period. If any other questions, comments, feel free if you want to be unmuted and just chat, or you could write it in the text box. If everyone's had a pretty good webinar, we can kind of just wrap it up and you guys can bounce me some questions by email. Feel free to do that. Hopefully I covered everything. I try not to get too technical, but at the same time, I think try to hopefully get everyone around the island in similar conditions a little quicker next time. Okay, Troy's got a question. Troy, let me see if I can unmute you here. There we go, Troy. There you are, buddy.
Dude, thanks for the talk, man, and the fantastic shirt.
Thank you.
I got a question for you, because a few things you were saying there about, having different people communicating to you on the boat. One thing that I've always noticed, especially on the bigger boats, is communication is great, but then sometimes there's too many chefs. How do you deal with, allowing communication, allowing people to be heard, but at the same time, keeping that kind of keeping people concentrating on their jobs as well?
Yeah, Troy, that is an amazing question. I'm going to say that there was an issue of that on our boat, and what we decided afterwards, and it was kind of talked about before, but everyone was excited that day, and it was a new boat to us. But at the same time, we definitely had a lot of recommendations, and in these type of races, you're going to have everyone out the boat, and if you have a lot of confident sailors, everyone's going to be putting their 2 cents in. But as a tactician, it started like bogging down your brain. You're getting way too much. It's almost like if you see something, it's good to say it, but don't start saying we should go here, we should go there. Another thing, like, if your tactician makes a call and it's not right, just getting on them and like saying we're going the wrong way is definitely, not the thing to do. So the way that we figured it out, and I would recommend is the tactician should be making all the calls, okay? On terms of jibing, tacking, and where we're heading next. Navigator should be talking about depth. If there's marine traffic coming up, navigator should be worried about the bigger picture in terms of rocks, if there's islands coming up, talking about that. And then you should have someone designated on the boat to be talking about crew weight. Okay, so you should have those should be the 3 people talking. Obviously, there's going to be a little chatter, but if you want to bring something up to either the navigator or the tactician, say the navigator and the tactician's the same person. I'm sure that's on lots of boats, especially the smaller ones, like probably the Melges 24s and the San Juan 24s. You want to say, this is what I see, and this is what's happened in the past. But don't try to be like we're doing something wrong or we're losing right now, because you don't want your tactician to make a decision based on your comment. You want to make your comment be included in the tactician's decision. And at the end of the day, the tactician should be the one making that end call. And everyone there. So as I said, you should have the navigator talking about, getting close to shore, tactician deciding where to go. And then we had our mainsail trimmer talking about body weight. Everyone else should be pretty quiet. You're allowed to give your opinion. I wouldn't want to be on a boat where you were told to shut up the whole time. But when everyone's chirping their opinions, up, down, up, what's it called? That is not going to help. That is just going to, as Troy said, that's going to create a headache. So that's what we kind of did. Obviously, there's different numbers of people on each boat. Tammy, as you guys could probably read, said after the round table, 1 skipper, 1 voice. Tactician, navigator, talk to skipper. I think that's a very good point. I think you need 1 voice, because as soon as someone else starts talking up, then it just kind of gets mishmashed and you're not working towards your common goal, which is like working up the race course and letting your tactician make the call. So you know what, that is a great call. And Troy, the biggest thing is in those drifter conditions, because everyone wants to like go faster. So it's like, oh man, I see this boat's doing this boat's doing that. Let your sail out, bear off. No, we need to tack. We need to do this. And as a driver, there's no way you're going to be able to be successful listening to that. So you need to be able to listen to 1 person and 1 person only, and that needs to be the tactician. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. I think on our boat we have a little.
Yeah. Oh, how'd you guys do?
We have a little trick on our boat where, well, we've been training a bit, and we want everyone's input, especially when we're figuring out all the maneuvers and jibing our boat. We have a tricky kite that likes to wrap around the forestay. So we've been having a lot of talk in our boat, but we agreed on a certain word. I'm not going to tell you the word; it's a magic word. But we have a word that basically means like, I respect everything you guys are saying, but you need to just focus on your own job, like immediately. And once that word is called, everyone does, in fairness, because we've agreed upon it beforehand, everyone goes back and just checks their own job immediately. And it allows everything to settle down. And then you also don't feel like such a jerk kind of, asking people to shut up and stuff like that. Like, we have just this 1 word. Anyone can call it on the boat as well. And it means like, focus, get back to what you're doing. Because, when you're out there for 7 hours, which is what we were out there for, a little slower than you drew. But we had times we talked, we chatted, we got stuck into tactics. And then we also talked about, fun stuff as well, but that 1 word that we have means like, we need to switch back on here, concentrate on your own jobs.
Yeah, I really like that. I definitely think we could talk about adapting that into our program. And I'd recommend anyone else on this call, because sometimes it does, people might shut down if you're told to shut up, or if you're constantly being yelled at. So if you have a bit of a fun word, or a word that people don't get so upset by, and it's almost like, whoa, yeah, we're kind of getting out of control here. Let's bear down. And I really like that comment that you said, going back to your position and checking everything, right? So as soon as you hear that, like, boom, like the trimmer's now worried about his trim, the pick guy's checking if his lines are clear, the bow guy's making sure the kite's ready to go or the jib's up. You know, maybe if you're on the rail, you're hiking a little harder. So I really appreciate that comment. I think it's a really good one. And in those long races that it's like brain buster tough to get through those transition zones, it's very easy for everyone to become a chef in the kitchen. So I really appreciate that. Anybody else? I'm just going to mute you here, Troy. I really appreciate the question.
Thanks for the talk, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Hold on for the last slide. There's a little thank you. All right, guys. I thought that was one of the best questions I've heard on one of my webinars yet today. Anybody else want to follow up with another question or comment? Like, you guys can also comment about, what worked on your guys' boats that you might be able to pass along, because I think that's what Troy just did, and I just learned a little something, and I'm here also to learn from you guys. If you said you've learned everything as a sailor, I don't think you've been out there long enough. And I think some of the best sailors in the world still sail and still learn things every day they get out there. So everyone should be open-minded to comments. Everyone sails a little different. Every team works a little different. So seeing someone else's view, you might not have to directly, use that trick for your book, but you could kind of adapt it to make it work for your team. So we got a question coming in from Jamie Bennett. Do you have any thoughts about driving to the kite versus trimming in light air or shifty wind? That's a tough question. A lot of the time, if you're trying to get in the light and shifty stuff, I would say if your tactician wants you to go straight, you should be trimming. Then if you're just trying to get the boat moving, you might want to drive to the kite to try to, because if it's real shifty, you letting it out or letting it in, especially if you have a symmetrical and the pole has to come way back and there's huge adjustments, you may want to drive to it a little bit and a little bit of trim. So I think that would be dependent on, what the current situation is on the boat and where you're planning on heading and how shifty the wind is. I think the trimmer should always be on and making sure that kite is trimmed. But sometimes, the driver can only make the difference. Like if you say, especially if you're going upwind, you need to bear off. A lot of the times though, when you bear off, you probably should be easing that kite a little bit. I mean, that jib a little bit, just a little bit, but just, you're bearing off. You want to get that speed going again. Your boat speed's probably slowed down. Then once you get back up to your point, you can pull it back in. I think it's really dependent, but I think it's really dependent on where you're going and how shifty the wind is. But if you're trying to go straight, I would just trim to it. That would be my comment. And if you're kind of allowed to go around. Yeah, that's a very good point. James, especially moving your rudder, it turns into a brake. Okay, so trimming that sail, making sure you're trimming and not making your driver drive around too much. Saying that sometimes there is, the driver will have to change course because of a wind change. But yeah, very good comment. The more you move the rudder, the slower you go. That rudder's a big brake on the back. That's why you kind of use body weight a lot of the time, if you can, on the boats to help maneuver the boat without moving too much rudder. Great question, Jamie, and thanks for that comment, James. Any other follow-up questions? Anything else anyone wants to talk about that was successful on their boat, or anything that wasn't so successful, or any questions that you may have thought about during my little spiel here, the debrief? Okay. All right. Well, as I said, feel free to email me, call me, text message me on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you want to find me. I always be glad to chat with anyone about sailing and your comments, and feel free to reach out to me if you you have some questions about sails, you need a sail repaired. The big thanks, Tammy just wrote thank you, but I don't think that this debrief would have been possible without these two guys right here. And there was a third that was very involved. So the SLOTHS is the yacht club, online yacht club. Troy and Joey have done an amazing job kind of spearheading these races. I've never seen so many people excited to get back out in the water again. Jason Davies really took over in terms, he ran the start, he ran the finish, he was part of the organization, he's a big part of the SLOTHS. So I just want to say a big thank you to all of them. I look forward to working with the SLOTHS again. As Troy just said, the prize giving video was just posted on the Facebook. So if you want to go on the Facebook, just Google SLOTHS, look it up. The prize giving's on there. Troy and Joey's videos are always awesome. They usually get me laughing, especially when they wear masks like this. Sometimes when they take them off too. But I just really want to appreciate, let these guys know how much I think the whole sailing community in Vancouver appreciates, them helping out and setting up a race course like this, because I think everyone needed it. And I think everyone had a great time. So thank you very much for everyone coming to the webinar tonight. I'm going to have a follow-up sail trim webinar that I volunteered to do for the SLOTHS. We'll be putting that up on the Facebook page. It's probably going to be in about like 2 weeks. I wanted a little sooner. We just ran into some complications, but we are going to have one. So we will have a follow-up webinar just about sail trim in itself. Welcome to everyone on here, plus any SLOTHS or any of your friends that want to be involved. Keep an eye on the website. Say hi to all your local SLOTHS, and thank you very much for coming out to this webinar.